Hi, YouTube. Welcome back. The global supply chain issues that have plagued us for the past 2 years have only gotten worse. Shipping delays are imminent this holiday season. Retailers that do not plan ahead will be stuck with goods on boats. And the problem's not unique to the US. This is a global issue. The problem is evident in all levels of the supply chain. In fact, there's a kink in every link of the supply chain. Supply chain impacts happening now are causing companies to rethink their entire logistics strategy. And the future may look very different. So let's get into why this is happening. We'll start with the short-term reason.
Number 1, labor shortages. Labor shortages due to the virus left ports, factories, trucking companies, and warehouses without workers. This leads us to number 2, COVID. Supply chain companies have not yet recovered from COVID. Many manufacturing plants overseas stopped production and closed plants due to the pandemic. This happened earlier in China and more recently in Vietnam and Malaysia. The recent shutdowns in Vietnam have impacted large companies like Nike, who produce most of their goods there. Overseas port terminals were also closed or short-staffed due to COVID. This is especially evident in China, where exports came to a standstill early on, causing goods scheduled for export to pile up at ports. Adding to the chaos was a global chip shortage, slowing the production of Xboxes, smartphones, and even cars. Increased demand for these items magnified the problem. This leads us to number 3, demand changes. The pandemic created a surge in demand for durable goods as consumers were limited in spending disposable income on restaurants, vacations, and other experiences. As supplies for some goods got tighter, consumers worried about not being able to get goods spent even more. On top of unprecedented demand, most of the increase came in online sales, where consumers expect fast delivery. Online shopping skyrocketed. I cannot emphasize enough how much demand for consumer goods has increased in the US. It's unprecedented. Many economists are predicting an 11% increase in consumer demand this holiday season. This leads us to number 4, the container shortage. Early in the pandemic, consumer demand increased, and China, fresh out of lockdown, began exporting goods. With little goods for the U.S. to export back to China due to lockdowns, shipping containers stayed in the U.S. In the U.S., at the 2 busiest ports, import containers increased by 27%, while export containers decreased by 12%. The result of this unbalance was that the price to import goods from Asia increased by 10 times. This brings us to number 5, port capacity. 90% of consumer goods are moved by sea. The vast majority of goods from Asia come into 2 ports, LA and Long Beach. These 2 ports have been backlogged for months. Cargo ships are not being offloaded due to the lack of port capacity, labor, and trucks, leaving ships full of cargo sitting for weeks. This brings us to number 6, the truck driver shortage. Trucking is the primary source of container transport once the goods arrive at port. The driver shortage has been ongoing in the U.S., but it has now been exacerbated by COVID. Even if there are enough drivers, there's a shortage of chassis. Chassis are in short supply, in part because more units are sitting around with full loads on them, unable to unload. A chassis usually picks up a container at the port, takes it to the warehouse for an immediate drop. They then empty the chassis. The empty chassis then returns to the port, where it is loaded up with another container. But now, with warehouses at capacity, a chassis with a full container may sit for weeks before it can be unloaded, leaving a lack of chassis at the port. On top of the lack of drivers and chassis, increasing truck prices are further suppressing the number of independent contractors willing to get into the trucking business. The average price of a Class 8 truck has increased by $19,000 in the last year. Even if you had the money to buy a truck, new truck orders are backlogged into late next year, at which time capacity may be back down. The truck drivers that are available are often stuck at ports and rail yards for days, waiting to load and unload. These long dwell times are causing truck drivers to make less money, despite unprecedented demand. Trains are not available to pick up the slack either. This brings us to number 7. Rail yard backups. Rail companies laid off tens of thousands of workers when the pandemic started. They're now having trouble hiring workers back. Intermodal yards are so full that incoming containers are blocking the ones ready for pickup, causing the whole yard to come to a standstill. The problem is so bad that several huge yards in Chicago recently had to halt incoming trains to clear the yards. And it's not just trucks and rail that are overloaded. Air cargo is impacted too. This brings us to number 8, air cargo. Fewer planes are flying due to the pandemic, making those flying very in demand and expensive. In normal circumstances, air freight was already 8 times higher than shipping by sea. This brings us to number 9, capacity. There are not enough ships, containers, trucks, trains, or planes to keep up with the demand. On top of that, warehouses and ports are at capacity. The result of this is many companies are going from just-in-time warehouse management to just-in-case.
Companies are once again stockpiling product when they can get it. Stockpiling, however, is dependent on storage space, and warehouses are at capacity cannot be increased quickly, as they take 6 months to a year to build. Besides, construction materials coming from China are stuck at port. Prices for steel and cement have recently skyrocketed. This brings us to number 10, predictability. The global supply chain is designed for predictable demands, not these unpredictable demands that have been happening lately. Everything is going wrong simultaneously, which makes it hard to manage. But all these issues are short-term. There are also long-term problems contributing to the shipping crisis. Let's talk about the longer-term supply chain problems that have helped lead to this crisis.
Number 1, offshoring. The offshoring of cheap goods from overseas decimated our capacity to manufacture things at home. And items that are manufactured in the U.S. still rely on raw materials from overseas. So with the current crisis, even goods manufactured in the U.S., like automobiles, are impacted. Number 2, ships too big to fail.
Container ships have been in the news a lot lately. The huge Ever Given ship that got wedged in the Suez Canal for 6 days, freezing more than 1 million in trade, up to 179 ships waiting to dock at 2 California ports. So just how big are these things? Today's container ships hold 23,964 TEUs, or containers. A container is 20 foot long by 8 foot wide. These container ships hold over 500 million iPhones. The ships, with a length of 121 stories, are as long as some of the tallest buildings in the world.
Number 3, truck drivers. Again, the shortage of truck drivers in the U.S. has been building for a while now, with companies having trouble finding and keeping qualified drivers. Long hours away from home, coupled with low pay and poor working conditions, have caused many drivers to leave. At the end of 2018, pre-COVID, the U.S. was short 60,000 truck drivers. The shortage is expected to reach 100,000 by 2024, and some people say we're already there.
Number 4, lack of communication. The global supply chain is marked by fragmentation of decision-making, limited collaboration between buyers and suppliers, and no centralized authority. In the U.S., there's a lack of communication and information sharing by key players in the supply chain. Concerns over data privacy, business secrets, and security have resulted in a disintegrated approach. According to Gene Sirocco, Executive Director of the Port of Los Angeles, the United States is decades behind foreign ports in getting carriers, terminals, shippers, to provide each other with access to commercial data for planning purposes. Information sharing is desperately needed to make planning decisions, especially in times of crisis. Number 5, profit-first mentality. Global supply chains focus on finances above all else, creating a messy, fragile system. A problem at any point in the chain creates further problems, which multiply along the way.
Number 6, spending on infrastructure. Spending on U.S. infrastructure has not helped either. From 2007 to 2017, total spending on infrastructure fell by $9.9 billion. In addition to a drop in spending, much of the existing infrastructure is reaching its useful lifespan. This leaves ports, rail yards, airports, bridges, and highways in bad shape or without updates, further slowing down the supply chain. Number 7, tariffs. Tariffs imposed on China caused a decline in exports from the U.S., adding to the shipping container imbalance. Number 8, climate impacts. You're probably wondering, climate impacts, how is this affecting the chaos? Well, from floods in China and India to hurricanes and wildfires in the U.S., the impacts of a warming climate are impacting the supply chain by causing unpredictable weather delays. Recent attempts by China to cut down on emissions from coal burning have caused factories to shut down due to lack of electricity.
As we've discussed, the supply chain issues are many. So what have the impacts of all this disruption been? Supply chain bottlenecks are causing a ripple effect throughout the economy. So let's talk about these impacts. Containers. Fewer containers means many are not getting to the middle of the country. Shipping companies wanting to turn containers around quickly and get them back to Asia, where they can make huge profits by shipping them back to the U.S. The price of a shipping container from Asia to the U.S. went from $2,000 a container last year to $20,000 this year. And if the huge profit margins were not enough to convince companies, China started paying an extra for empty container. The profits combined with the bonus incentivized shippers to quickly return with empty containers rather than wait for U.S. export. The Port of LA is currently exporting 3 times more empty containers than full ones. California ports have no capacity. Containers are taking an average of 13 days to unload. Ships coming into port cannot even dock. The 2 largest ports have over 73 ships full of cargo anchored in the ocean waiting for a dock. And the delays are not just at port. Airports and rail yards are backed up too.
Consumers. The supply chain crisis is impacting consumers in multiple ways. Many items sell out faster and are replenished slower. With inventories at below historic levels, retailers cannot keep shelves or website items stocked. Overall, there's a 6 to 8 week delay in receiving goods, and there will be fewer holiday deals. Forget deals. You'll be lucky to find the items you want, unless you started shopping in October.
Pricing. Prices are not just increasing for consumers. Shipping prices are increasing for nearly everyone. In fact, prices are skyrocketing. Carriers are seeing increased shipping rates cut into their bottom line. Some of these price increases are passed on to retailers, resulting in fewer profits. Smaller companies cannot absorb the higher costs and continue to struggle. On top of the shipping costs, warehouse storage costs are up 20% over the past year. Ports may be adding to the costs as they are considering imposing large storage fees designed to discourage shippers from leaving their goods at port. So, with all these shipping cost increases, somebody must be profiting.
Shippers. Ocean carriers are getting rich. The largest ocean carriers combined made 23 times more profits in the past 6 months than during the same period last year. That is 1 million versus 23 million. Investors buying up logistic assets are also making huge profits. While some multinational firms are making unprecedented profits, the rest of the economy is feeling the pinch. Inflation. The decline in U.S. manufacturing think autos due to the chip shortage, has led to a lower GDP. The rising cost of scarce goods has caused inflation to rise by 5.4%. The Fed likes to keep inflation at 2%, so the rising inflation rate is concerning to economists.
This is a short-term problem, but it may not improve until the supply chain issues are dealt with. On top of the economic impacts, supply chain inefficiencies are contributing to global warming. So, how are companies adapting to these impacts? Companies with deep pockets are purchasing more air freight. Large companies like Costco, Walmart, Target, and Home Depot are chartering their own planes and ship. Unfortunately, this is not an option for small and medium-sized companies. Some companies are moving items to lesser-used, smaller ports. Others, like Procter & Gamble, are changing shipping lanes as needed. Again, these options that large companies use are not easily accomplished by smaller companies who do not have the bargaining power and are more likely to have contractual obligations dictating where the freight is going. Companies are also trying to anticipate business needs way ahead and book cargo earlier, giving them more lead time. Companies are filling the precious containers they do have with smaller, higher-priced goods like phones. A 20-foot shipping container can hold 200 mattresses versus 2,660 iPhones. If you calculated the cost per item using the $20,000 per shipping container rate, you'd be paying $7.52 to ship an iPhone versus $100 to ship a mattress. Target, FedEx, UPS, Walmart, Home Depots, and others announced expanded hours of operation and overnight hours to get containers off the dock. The International Longshore and Warehouse Union announced members will work extra shifts at California ports. And ports will go from operating 22 hours a day to 24 hours a day. Ramping up nighttime operations at West Coast ports, as well as freight rail yards, warehouses, and shipping hubs, is the most effective way to get goods off of container ship. But this won't help if there are no chassis. Furthermore, once the goods are out of the coastal areas, there is a severe shortage of long-haul truck drivers. Wage increases may eventually lure some drivers back, but how many remains to be seen. Biden has indicated he will send National Guard troops to ports to unload and drive trucks. But they're also going to need chassis and warehouses for this to work.
Manufacturing. Some companies have come up with innovative manufacturing solutions. Levi's doesn't allow more than 20% of its products to come from one country. They also produce all products in 2 countries simultaneously. So if one country has manufacturing or shipping issues, they can get the product from another country. Many companies are moving or considering moving manufacturing closer to the U.S. South America is a popular spot for these moves as labor is still relatively cheap and goods can be transported by truck. Doesn't help with the trucking shortage, though. Infrastructure. The U.S. government passed a bill to spend hundreds of billions of dollars on infrastructure, including $17 billion on ports and waterways, $8 million on inland container yards, and $110 billion on roads, bridges, and other projects. Technology. Companies are investing more in technology to assist them with supply chain issues in the future. Procter & Gamble is investing in a data-driven supply chain that allows them to shift sourcing around the world. They believe that technology investments they make now will help avoid problems before they happen. But how can technology help with these black swan events? Technology can be used to leverage data to give increased visibility, creating more predictability into shifts in demand, inventory, and capacity. Priorities can then be analyzed and set to make calculated decisions. Increased visibility and goal prioritization allow companies to be more efficient and flexible.
When supply chain issues are more predictable, creative solutions can be made to deal with them. Every part of the supply chain, from manufacturers to shippers to warehouses to buyers, should be rethinking how to leverage technology to increase visibility. Although the world is more connected and interdependent than ever, the global supply chain remains mostly independent. COVID has demonstrated the domino effects that can happen when something unexpected occurs. As we get through the current crisis, we should all be more aware and prepared for future disruptions. Well, that's all I got today. Thanks for watching. We really appreciate it. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to subscribe, hit the subscribe button. And if you have a comment, we'd love to hear from you. You have some suggestions on future videos? Please let me know. Thanks again. Bye, YouTube.